I'm a musician. I'm at a loss for words when I was like, so what do you do? And what kind of music do you do? It's just like a long list of things. I'm trained in Hindustani classical music, and that's been my mainstay, and that's something I've been pursuing for as long as I can remember. And somewhere along the line, jazz happened, and other forms of Western music happened. So I've always been a very curious musician, and as I think somebody once talked about my mind being that so it's like it's constantly in Technicolor. So I've always been a curious musician, and I've been dabbling with, like I said, jazz, and I was on the stage, which is India's first English singing reality show.
Oh, really? Which season?
Yes, I was on the first season, which kind of got me to Bombay actually, and I think that was one of the most incredible experiences of my life, because it legit changed my life, because I finally moved base to Bombay, and Bombay was never in my plans, because I was already doing music in Calcutta. And so yeah, Bombay happened because of the stage. It kind of gave me a lot of exposure to Bombay, and I met people like Vishal Dadlani, Ehsan, Monica Dogra, Devrat Sanyal, and a bunch of such wonderful, amazing musicians who are all friends now, and it's just been great. So I'm still discovering who I am as a musician, to be honest. So it's fun. So mostly it's my most important loves are classical music and jazz. So that's where I'm at right now. So let's see where else life takes me.
So how different would you say your life was in Calcutta compared to that?
It was very, very different. Very, very, very different. I think, firstly, the years I spent in Calcutta has been very, very important as a space that kind of taught me a lot of things. I learned a lot. These were like my most important years in terms of just learning who or what a musician is. And so I was already working. I was working with an electronic music producer. I was assisting him. I was doing some kind of studio work. I also did some playback back in Calcutta. My first playback song ever was written by a legendary filmmaker who is not with us anymore. His name is Rituparna Ghosh. And it's been, Calcutta was, my experience in Calcutta was, it just built me up to kind of take the next step to be here in Bombay. So it's been very, 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 very interesting, and lots of learning, lots of it.
I'm sure this sounds like a great adventure that you just told me about. Like,
oh yes,
I followed
stage.
I saw stage. I think second season. So I had no idea about the first season whatsoever, and it's good to know, man. I'm just gonna after this live go back and watch you on stage.
Yeah, I mean, the first season, in fact, a lot of us, I'll tell you there are a bunch of indie artists who have been on the first, like Kamakshi Khanna, Saundarya, Anushka, Kamakshi Rai, Aditya Narayan, who's a very good friend of mine and a producer, singer. There are a host of them, Riminique. So we're all it feels like we all grew up together in the last 5 years, and this first season was amazing because it was the first time these guys were testing it out. It was one of a kind. First time, you have English singing happening on national television, and it was big for us, and we've been like family. So
yeah, I mean, it's always been a dream watching The Voice and all of these American shows, like going on a reality show and singing English songs. It's always been like a distant dream.
Yeah,
they made that happen.
So many of us, absolutely. For so many of us, because in India, look around you. There's so many amazing, fantastic musicians singing in English, but it's just that we didn't have a platform for that earlier. But well, it happened for, I think, stage happened for 3 years, 4 years. So yeah,
three seasons. I think it stopped
3 seasons. Yeah, 3 seasons.
I know because I think 2, 3 of them are my friends, and I think a couple of them have joined our college as students. So I've heard a lot about the show and the experience and the glam and the exposure and all of that.
Well, yeah, that was really incredible because that was the first time when I kind of landed in Bombay and I went to the studio to shoot for the stage. I was like, okay, this is what it feels like. This is what everybody keeps talking about. So, like, the lights and the dressing up, and then there was also the competition. But I remember, some of the producers really, really tried to kind of pit each of us against one another just to kind of increase TRPs. We were like, no, we're not going to give you that. So we were just always talking, always saying good things about one another. So there was like no drama whatsoever, which I think made it so much more special.
I'm sure it must have been a crazy experience and amazing. I'm definitely gonna go watch you on it.
Yeah. Oh, hi. Aditya is here. Aditya Narayan. He was on season 1. Brilliant producer, singer, friend.
Amazing, Ishita. So, if I had to ask you to describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
Okay. Seeker. I would call myself a seeker, in the sense that, as always, I'm always looking for deeper. I'm searching for the deeper meaning of life, to put it very simply. Seeker is one. I would definitely describe myself as joyful. I mean, I'm just forever bubbling with energy. And what else? How else do I describe myself? Talkative. I think this is what's coming to me right now. I talk a lot. I really talk a lot. Yeah. I think my friends would be able to describe me better because they'll probably have a whole list of things that I probably won't. Yeah.
I mean, seeker and joyful, they mean a lot. Seeker is something different that I've heard. Like, not a lot of people say that. So that's interesting,
Yeah.
very interesting. So, what do you seek? What
do I seek? Okay, that's an interesting one. So I've always been spirituality has been a very important part of my life. I used to talk about it with very close friends, but now I think this is the year when I actually started talking about it openly. That yes, I do believe in spirituality, and there's so much more to the universe and conversations around consciousness and just deeper understanding of ourselves through the process. So just seeking more than what meets the eye. Yeah.
Interesting, really nice. I mean, it's good to know that you believe in it. And I think it takes a lot of courage to start believing in something and preaching it at the same time.
Yeah. I think that's also because one can only do that when you personally experience the power of belief and the power of faith and what it can get you. So I think I've been one of those people. I think I keep telling a lot of people that my life literally runs on autopilot. In the sense, like when the way I moved to Bombay, nothing was planned, and I had the quintessential story of how if you talk to some of the oldies in Bombay, they're like, "Hey, मैं तो Bombay आया था pocket में 30 रुपए लेके," and it's that story. So my story is not pretty far behind, So I kid you not, I came to Bombay with $3,000 because that's all I had, and I knew that my stay and my food was going to be taken care of because of the show. But I think that was the beginning because I have never had any plan per se with life, like zero plans, okay? Because I have an idea of where I want to see myself someday, but it's not about, so this is what I'm going to do this year, this is what I'm going to do next year, this is how the trajectory of my life is going to be. It's never been that. It's never really been that. So that's why I say, plans have always been made for me. They've just opened up one step at a time. Like I said, coming to Bombay was never my plan. Coming to Bombay was never my plan. I never imagined that I would be living in Bombay, living alone in Bombay, in a studio apartment, pursuing music and having a career out of it. And it just happened. Things just kind of happened. So yeah, so that's why, and I have only the universe to thank, because the kind of people that came into my life, it's just a lot of people told me stuff like, oh my God, Bombay is such a scary space. How are you kind of surviving that? I was like, it's not. It's not, because my reality has been very different. It's like I've had great people around me who have supported me, who have helped me out in the process, and constantly at that, and I'm so grateful for that. And I've also realized that the more gratitude you have, I mean, I know this, I don't want to sound like just another person out of Instagram preaching spirituality, because we have so much of that already, but I'm just speaking from personal experience. It's the more gratitude you have for something, your perception of life changes. And when your perception of life changes, things happen to you differently. Like you begin to see the good in every negative situation, not eroding the harsh reality of agony, or not eroding the harsh reality of pain or anything that has happened to you. But you kind of begin to see the deeper reality to that. So everything is a blessing. It's just about perception and how you perceive life. So I think that is something the seeker part of me kind of has experienced that over and over and over again. So I can only speak from experience. So
I can completely relate. I think where you were a few years ago, I am here right now when it comes to being in Bombay, pursuing music, being new to the city, living alone. I mean, all that can be overwhelming, right?
Yeah. It's very intimidating to people outside. They're like, whoa, how do you do it? When you're in it, you don't realize that you're actually doing it. But when the moment you come a certain distance, and then you look back, and then you realize, whoa, I actually made that journey. And it wasn't easy, but I think I survived. And look at me. It's like we have those moments, when you kind of look back and say, yeah, I think you did good.
Yeah, and I think this quarantine period is that moment where you're like, you've taken a pause and there's a break, and you just go back remembering all that you have done, all that you could have done, who you are today.
Yeah. And I think this year is a huge learning experience for literally every person. I know a lot of people say, including myself, stuff like, oh my God, this is like it's an episode out of Black Mirror, this is the worst year ever. All of that is true. It is emotionally extremely trying. It is messing with all our heads, especially the kind of news that's coming out. Having said that, though, this is also a very important year for us there are certain realities that we really need to look at. And I think it's forcing us to do that. So, and only good can come out of that, because change is never smooth. Transitions are never easy. Like from one big stage of where the world is right now, and there's a whole shift happening globally. Even in our consciousness, there's a whole shift happening. There are more and more people, like I said, more and more people are talking about mental health. More and more people are, warming up to the idea of identity biases. Like now today there's Black Lives Matter. It's the Pride Month. There's women empowerment. There's so much happening right now. I don't think just 10 years ago, I don't think any of us would have imagined this to be. This is where things are changing. So it's not going to be easy. It is a very privileged thing. When I talk about collateral damage, it's a very privileged thing to say, but it's still true. Like we are all paying the price in some way or the other, but this is also a way for us to move into a newer reality where there is more. Yeah, people are talking about empathy and compassion. So it's really time to put those things in action.
Right? Actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely.
I mean,
and only pain does that to you. Like when you're happy and everything is fine, you won't have that shift inside. Like, oh my God, only agony and pain and grief makes you realize there is more to my reality than meets the eye.
I mean, yeah, if people are raising their voices right now, it's because of something bad that has happened, right? It's because bad things are still happening on such a crazy level. black
And they've
matter.
always happened. It's like people's realizations have changed. People's consciousness has changed. They're like, oh, wait, this is what we've been okay with, but this is not something we can be okay with anymore. It's like our bodies are rejecting it, you know? And when I say bodies, I literally mean physically our bodies are rejecting like old patterns of behavior, old patterns of thinking, because we're entering a new world. So, yeah.
So when you talk about you believing spirituality and all these things that you just said, were you always spiritual or did something make you want to explore more into
No,
spiritual?
I always was. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
as a child, I grew up in a quintessential middle class Bengali family. So, my mother and my grandmother, they've all been like every day sham ko puja karna hai. So that is something you have to do. So as kids, you don't question things. Oh, mummy ne bola you have to do that chant, so I will sit down and do that chant. So it was just something that was in the family. But the older I was getting, and when more and more life happened, and by life I mean, different challenges that keep coming your way, you begin to, there's just a part of you that wakes up to say that, okay, there is a part of me that is waking up, that seeker part of me. There's that part of me that believes in spiritual, progress, or that believes in spiritual growth. So when your life is easy breezy, it doesn't necessarily, although this is an assumption I'm making. I'm not saying people who have had an easy life are not spiritual. That is not what I'm saying at all. But all I'm saying is sometimes challenges in life kind of, in a way, push you deeper into that. So that's where I think, so it's always been there. So, and it's just, like I said, the older I get, the deeper the deeper the reason to pursue it grows.
That makes sense. And I
Yeah.
think this whole period of quarantine and lockdown, all of this has just like made all of us a little thoughtful and
Yes.
questioning
Oh my
everything
God. So
around us,
important.
right?
So important.
So,
Yes. Yes.
yeah. I mean, even I've been trying to understand the whole concept of spirituality. I've been trying to explore and understand a lot of things. So I understand, like I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most artists, I think, I also like to believe that most artists have a natural affinity to that, because art comes from a space that you don't have control over. You're just born with a certain ability, but where that ability comes from, you don't know. It's just, like I said, you could be like, yeah, you could have your genes. It could be in your genes. It could be, but the ability to create something, you can't explain it. You can, because if like a song makes you feel something, and that doesn't happen from here only. This comes to play, the only a percentage of your logical mind comes to play, but there's a whole other reality that's unfolding, especially for artists who are on stage. And I think you would also know, like when you're on stage, even if you plan everything, there are different things happening, and you just have to not get in the way with it. So I think with artists, spiritual journey is just, it's a natural way of being for us.
It's like constant positive talking, especially when you're in a physical space, any creative space. Constant positive talking. There's writing block. There is like so much going on. And
Yeah.
I think you can just
Yeah.
tell yourself that you need to get through this, especially as you said, when you're
Yeah.
on stage, you've planned a set list, you go on board, and then suddenly something goes wrong.
Yeah, so and it's just, you're just being guided through the process. Yeah, yeah, true.
Absolutely. So, what does a day in Ishita's life looks like? Like, describe an everyday
Pre-lockdown or during lockdown?
right now.
Two very different ones.
I think you can answer both.
Pre-lockdown, yeah, I mean, pre-lockdown, it used to be, I would wake up and, I would have a maid who would come to clean the house, and then when she leaves, it's everything. Like, I know, like, the household part of things is taken care of, but during the lockdown, it's different, because I've got to do the cooking and the cleaning and the the work that I do. So it's like I wake up in the morning, I spend some time. I try to do yoga regularly, and by yoga I only mean Surya Namaskar. But I'm an extremely lazy human being when it comes to physical exercise. But I'm trying. I'm trying to push myself to do some yoga. I meditate every day. And then, of course, I practice, and then, the day rolls on. I'm cooking. I'm teaching a lot these days. So there's always lessons lined up in the evenings, and then again you've got to cook and somewhere, find some time to clean. So my days are very busy. And, when I say my days are busy, sometimes if I'm just, lying down in bed and staring at the ceiling, I'm still busy. That is my time to stare at the ceiling. I am busy. So, but lately I haven't had time to do that too. But yeah, this is what my life is like right now. It's pretty straightforward actually. But lots to do throughout the day.
I'm sure teaching takes up a lot of energy and time and patience.
It does. Absolutely. And but the thing is, it's also so nourishing for me because I'm a very selfish person. So when I teach, I teach to learn. And that has had such a huge impact on me and the way I look at music. It's like you're going back to basics. And the joy that you derive when somebody that you've been teaching or somebody that you've been helping, learn the music, and when they actually are able to do the things that they weren't able to do before they, came to you for help, that feeling is so beautiful. So there's a shine on my face. I'm like, oh my God, and it feels, you're so grateful that, you've been able to help somebody do that. And I feel very happy when other people say, now I can, like somebody very simply, like one of my students, I could say, but she's older than I am. And she's like, Ishita, I could finally hit ni and sa. So, sa re ga ma pa dha ni sa. So, and that, because I teach Indian music, right? And she's like, you know what? I can finally hit ni and sa. And the joy in her face, even if that's like, that's just 2 notes. But it's so important, just those little milestones. I was like, yeah, there you go. It's happening. See? So I see them enjoy it, and that makes me it nourishes me, and it kind of has really helped me look at my music in different ways and in a deeper way. So I really enjoy it, and I feel so blessed that in the middle of a pandemic, I'm able to do that, and I'm able to pay my bills because of that. So that's also because, again, the universe takes care of me, So
I think it's beautiful what you just described. The joy of being able to help someone when they come up to you and they're like,
it's just my heart feels so full. And even though I have classes like back to back, it's like sometimes I feel like I'm a government, I'm a clerk at a government office, because so one class ends, you end call, then again you call the next immediately after, and then hi, and then you're making notes. And so what can I do for you? Okay, making notes. So it kind of becomes like that, but it's like every person is so different. Like A is different from B, B is different from C. So I'm like, wow. So every person is asking for a different energy. Every person is asking for a different part of me. And I'm just exploring so much. It's just amazing. It's an amazing life.
Also learning, right? Also learning at the same time.
Yeah, learning at the same time, helping someone else learn and getting a deeper. And sometimes, when I'm learning, I'm like, wow, I knew that. I didn't know I know that. Oh, how did I come up with that? Oh, it's there. So, these things happen. So it's great fun.
I'm sure. Yeah. So, moving on. So, focusing more on your music. It's mostly, as you said, you come from like different backgrounds. You have like Western, jazz, Hindustani, a lot of diversity in your music. So, what kind of artists were you subjected to while growing up? Like, in a simpler word, who are your biggest influences?
I never have an answer to a question like this. Like, I've been asked this so many times, but I'm just like, I don't know where to begin. So when I was growing up, I was training in pure Hindustani classical music. So I was listening to a lot of classical music, especially I'm hugely inspired by my teachers in the classical field, Kaushiki Chakravarti, Artin Kalikatti Kekar, Kishori Amonkar, Bhimshen Joshi, Rashid Khan, Pandit Ajay Chakra. So these are all the people in the classical music fraternity. And then when I had a phase of, man, it's just been so varied. It's very hard for me to pin it down. I had a phase of, everyone in school does. I had a rock band and I was listening to Cranberries because everyone sings Zombie. Of course they do. I was listening to Evanescence. I was listening to I was listening to some Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park. Then somewhere in the middle, Don McLean happened. Then Simon and Garfunkel, and then with jazz, of course, came a whole different world. So obviously, I started with Ella Fitzgerald, Anita O'Day, thanks to my teacher then, who's no more, Mr. Carlton Keto. I was listening to initially when he also tried to introduce me to Charlie Christian and Charlie Parker, and back watching jazz, I was like, whoa, this is too intense for me. I don't understand anything that's happening. But yeah, in terms of vocalists, like I said, Anita O'Day, Sarah Vaughan, modern day vocalists. Of course, there is Gretchen Parlato, and I recently did a session with her. She's just incredible.
Yeah, I saw that. I've been planning to take one.
Oh my God, you should. You definitely should. She's so chill and she's so empathetic. She's so kind, and it's just amazing. And I think everyone, if you have a chance, as long as Gretchen is doing these workshops and one-on-one lessons, I think everybody should take them. Brad Mehldau, from pianist. In terms of Sufi music, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, Abida Parveen. I don't know, there's just so much. I'm also pretty late to most parties, and I discovered Nils Fromm very recently. Yeah, there's just no end. Tom Misch. I'm always listening to some stuff. Yeah, it's just, I don't know which one to listen to, and which I was like, wait, what do I listen to now? What do I listen to? Ali Farkatur, Fatoumata Diawara. In fact, I just had a recording today, and I was like, oh my God, this is such an Ali Farkatur sound. It's like this African musician, African Egyptian musician. I think everybody should go check out Ali Farkatur's music. I'm sorry, it's amazing. Excuse my French. So yeah, so there's so much out there to kind of learn, and it's very hard for me to pin like artists down like that.
Absolutely. If someone asks me that question as to who's your favorite artist, I can never answer it because I listen to so many people, and after being exposed to jazz, as you said, it's a whole different world. It's like
I know, it's just, where do I begin? Tell me now.
Yeah. True. So, as a child, did you imagine growing up and being so versatile with music? I mean, you said that you learned Hindustani as a child. So, did you ever imagine that when you grow up, you would be so versatile with genres and, you'd want to pursue music as a full-time career?
I knew I wanted to pursue music as a full-time career. There have been quite a number of heated discussions at the dinner table about that, but eventually I got my way. I knew I wanted to pursue music, but I didn't know what it was like to pursue music full-time, because you're also constantly, and it's fair, it's a fair assumption because you don't get a salary at the end of the month. Right? So it's like you're living paycheck to paycheck, like literally paycheck to paycheck. So as a full-time, I didn't know what that life would be like. So I always thought I actually wanted to do PhD and I wanted to kind of do, so I have a master's in English literature, and I thought maybe I'm going to be a professor. I'd probably apply to an Oxford or a Cambridge, high hopes. But maybe apply to an Oxford or a Cambridge, become a professor, and then maybe pursue music on the side because it's something one does. Till one of my family friends was like, no, not a good idea because that, if you were a full-time professor, it's going to take all your time. Then when I met one of my mentors, he told me straight up that this was, I think, I was just out of college. I was Yeah, I was around 20, 21 years old, and he was like, look, if you want to do music, it's a 24/7 job. You can't have a plan B. And I was like, but how can you not have a plan B? How am I going to survive? He said, well, you learn. So he gave me a lot of confidence. He was like, look, this is what it is. There is no plan B. Of course, it works differently for different people. I know personally, I know so many people who are doing the music and pursuing something else at the same time, because it's hard. Okay, it's difficult to just sail on one boat as an artist and hope to kind of
uncertainty, right?
There's so much uncertainty. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy. So I really admire a lot of people that they are able to like balance two different things together. Like you, for example, you are doing such good work with Sakshi, and you're a musician at the same time. So it's great. But for me, I wasn't able to do that. Like also in the sense that somehow life also took me to a certain direction that I have never had a job in my life. A salaried job. So it's like the moment I got done with college and then university, I was already part of a fusion project and was working in the studio. So somehow just life took a certain direction, and yeah, so I've just been a full-time musician since I was 22 years old. Yeah. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So before you continue, I want you to just talk a little bit about Sakshi and what Sakshi does.
Yeah, definitely. So this whole Stage for Change series that we're doing is a part of our Make Home a Safe Space campaign, which we have live right now, which is basically collecting funds for the victims of child sexual abuse and domestic violence during the lockdown period, because there have been so many cases. Since everybody is home, these kind of abuses, they just tend to increase, right? So currently we are battling these two issues and trying to spread awareness to get this to stop eventually. I know it's not going to happen overnight, but we're trying to like put an end to it. So Sakshi, basically we also have a youth-led movement called the Rakshan Project, where we have the mandate to go around 40,000 colleges in India and train the NSS units, the young students, to equip themselves with knowledge based on recognizing and preventing child sexual abuse, because you can't put the burden of child sexual abuse on a child, right? You need to make the youth or even the elders aware of such a thing that exists and such a thing, how we need to prevent it and how to go about it. So this is what Sakshi is doing, and this campaign is a part of our organization right now. And this whole series of live session, collaborating with artists from different backgrounds, collaborating with survivors who come out. We've had so many brave survivors who have just come out and like share their stories from being a victim to a survivor. Yeah, so I mean, it's just inspiring people, and it's also doing us good in a way. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing.
Yeah, and I'm so happy. I'm so glad that you invited me to be a part of this.
Absolutely.
More power to you, more power to Sakshi, and yeah, these are tough times. So
indeed they are. Which brings me to my next question. As an artist, this whole lockdown period and the whole potential aftermath, that this whole thought of uncertainty, for example, I don't know when the live music scene is going to happen again in Mumbai. Like, but it's so infected, you never know when live music is going to happen or any sort of music is going to happen. So like a lot of artists have been very emotionally taxed and exhausted. And it has taken a huge toll on their mental health. And since everybody has been talking about mental health constantly after what has happened in the past few days, what do you think about it?
I'm very happy that there is a conversation that is happening. Now, it's a very nuanced conversation, I'll be honest, because right now, especially what's happened in the last few days, with the passing of Sushant Singh Rajput, and social media has completely, it's been taken over by conversations around mental health, taken over by conversations around depression. But the reality is and everyone is, talking about um, reaching out to people who are suffering. Everyone is talking about, your friends are, we love you, your friends are a call away, and all of that. It's a nuanced discussion because I know most people mean well, like everybody, and I'm not just talking about people on social media. The whole world is on social media right now. But anyway, most people, I think mental health is so layered because there are degrees there are different kinds of mental conditions, right?
Yeah.
Now, depression itself probably has, I do not have the statistics, but depression itself manifests itself in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Not everybody goes through depression in terms of like, I can't get out of bed, I have loss of appetite, and so, and I have to be on antidepressants. Everybody doesn't go through the same things. Different people have different, sometimes, our previous generation, they have gone through life, raised children, done, did their 9-to-5 jobs, taken care of parents and children and all of that, living with depression. They have not been, in bed, unable to get out of bed. So that's what I'm saying. Like, different people go through different kinds of depression. So there has to be more understanding and more sensitivity towards understanding what depression is. I saw an interview a long time ago where they said depression is not sadness. Depression does not mean I am sad today. Depression is a sort of emptiness where there is no emotion. In the sense, like, all you feel is a sinking sense of blankness. Like, you do not have the hopelessness. You do not have the energy to get up. You do not have the energy to make that phone call. You do not have the energy to cook for you. You just don't have energy to do even the things that you enjoy, that you love. So I know a lot of people, they say, you just need to be stronger. Bullshit. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
That is not how depression works. You can't just be, and I'll be honest, for a very, very long time in my own life, in my early 20s, that's what I used to think. Because that's what I used to listen to all the time. Snap out of it. It's not, what is depression? Depression kuch nahi
Get
hota.
over it.
It's just a phase. Get over it. Snap out of it. You have to be stronger. No.
Yeah.
You see, depressed people, while dealing with a sense of emptiness that they're feeling, and I'm really trying my best to describe it, I don't necessarily have the right words, and I do not necessarily have the right terms also, maybe, but I can only speak for myself and what I have seen in myself and in the closest people around me and the people I know who go through it. It's not about being strong, because depressed people are also dealing with internalized guilt and internalized shame for feeling the way they're feeling and for being the way they are being at that point.
Also feeling like a burden, but trying to reach out to people.
Yes, like, why to talk about my issues with someone else? So there is so much shame. Like, a depressed person is already feeling shame. So, and no, when people say, you can just reach out to me if you're feeling depressed. No. Depressed people are unable to reach out. You do the work of reaching out. If you are aware of somebody, or if you know somebody who either is going through a depressive phase or is prone to going through depressive phase, or is, has a condition one is battling in certain phases of that life, you need to reach out. And this is something I learned the hard way. This is something I learned from, and I'll be honest, I learned this just a few years ago. I remember one of my best friends, she went through a huge loss in her life, and I remember, as a best friend, it was my responsibility to call her, to find out how she's doing. But I told her, but you could have just told me. And she said, no, you cannot expect a depressed person to reach out to you, especially if a person who is, say, for example, suicidal. You can't expect that out of them. You need to reach out. If when you know that this is happening, you have to keep a tab on them. Even if they say, I will call you when I feel better, great, wait. But maybe give it some time and drop a line. Don't hound them. So, like I said, it's a very, very nuanced conversation because we don't know. We need to accept that we don't know how to deal with depression. We need to accept that we don't know how to talk to a person who is depressed. We don't know. We end up saying all the stupid shit. We end up saying shit like, it's going to be okay. Well, sure, it's going to be okay. Like, yeah, but you're telling
how?
a depressed person it's going to be okay. It's not registering. So I think what we need to do is just listen. And this also brings me to my next point, which is something which I posted about yesterday. If you are not in touch with your own self, and if you are not in touch with your own feelings, it will be difficult. I won't say it's impossible, but I'll say it is difficult to reach out to another person who is feeling vulnerable or who is having a hard time being in touch with their own emotions. So you need, like I said, we talk about being vulnerable these days, right? It's the new buzzword. Oh my God, you have to be vulnerable and allow yourself to just feel things. It's not that easy. It is not that easy. So it takes a lot of work it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable, because you have to allow yourself to fall apart. And it is difficult because the world doesn't allow you to do that. The world doesn't give you a permission to. If you react to something, it's not okay. Whoa, why did you react? Oh God, be chill, dude. And this is something I keep hearing all the time. I've heard it several points of time in my life where I've been told, dude, you got no chill. And it's a kind of, it's shaming somebody. Sure, sometimes there are people who take things too seriously. I've been that person. Sometimes I take things too seriously. Now the thing is, but sometimes I don't. But we need to be a little more empathetic towards another person and not shame them for feeling the way they are feeling, which is why most people can't reach out, because people are constantly, very covertly, they're not consciously shaming, okay, mind you, very covertly they're trying to be like, you're making me uncomfortable. They won't say it, but you'll know that you're being made to feel uncomfortable. So it's a lot of work we individually really, really need to do. And grief is something that currently we are all feeling in our bones. We are feeling it in our bones. We just don't know. Some of us just don't know it. Some of us are very, very in touch with ourselves. And some of us are just, just not feeling anything, which is great too. I mean, everything is okay, but you have to allow for grief. You have to allow it. Otherwise, we'll just be stuck in this loop. So I'm sorry, you were talking about something else. I took the whole conversation somewhere else. I don't know if I answered your question.
It makes so much sense. It makes so much sense because it's so relevant to what is happening right now. And I think, as you said, the keywords or the buzzwords that are going on right now is vulnerability, depression. I think it's very important for people to know that looking up symptoms on Google and self-diagnosing themselves is something people need to stop doing.
Oh my God, yes. Because WebMD will tell you have cancer for everything.
Yeah. It will tell you
if you have a physical ache. Yeah, if you have a physical ache, something to do, okay. It's just, there's a lot of fear mongering out there also. And depression affects your bodies also, right? Because because if your mind is foggy, you'll feel it in your body. So, yeah.
And online, they'll just direct check that you have major depressive disorder, and it takes a lot of tests and a lot of analyzing for a psychologist or a professional to diagnose you with something like that. And once you make a block in your head that, oh my God, I am depressed, it just pushes you further in that pit hole of depression. So it's very important for people to know. Yeah, that. And I think another thing which is extremely important is using the right language with people.
Very important. Very
Yeah,
important. Yes.
because it's
Yes.
very, very sensitive sometimes. You need to be extremely careful, as you said, different types of depression. You need to have different types of language with different type of people. Like you have to adapt to different persona with different people. Everyone's going through something different,
True.
right? You can't generalize depression and say, oh, all my friends are depressed. I need to just be there for them.
It's not that simple. True. And I think we should all educate ourselves. Each one of us needs therapy at some point in our lives, and we need to be done with the stigma around that. You know, I've heard so many people say, but I'm not a therapy person. I don't know what that means. Maybe you're not. There's no judgment there, but I don't know what that means. Everybody needs therapy. You need to understand what it is that you're going through, and it's okay. It's this is part of being human. A huge part of us being depressed is also because we are numb to our feelings. We are not allowed to feel things because again it's such a chain reaction, right? If I'm feeling something, even our parents, and all of us, and I say this without any kind of shame, without any kind of judgment, all our parents have made mistakes. They have not known any better because that generation was not open to such conversations at this point. So they have all made mistakes, and there are a lot of traits that you kind of grow into since you were a child, right? So there were times when you were not allowed to feel certain things. They said, just shut up. What are you doing? The language that has been used. What is this drama that you're doing? So it kind of stays in your body. You may feel like, oh, it's not important, but your body picks it up. Your body has more intelligence than you give it credit for. So when you are not allowed to feel your feelings, you start numbing yourself. And then when you start feeling, you are self-talking yourself out of it. So there are so many different feelings going on in your system that you can't even tell the difference between anger and hurt. So how do you know which is which? So it just results in this huge ball of confusion.
And that is why we need therapy.
That is why we need therapy, so that you're able to, so that somebody who's trained to do this can tell you, this is this and this is that. So you need to trust someone. Yeah. But I understand it's exhausting for a lot of people to go to a therapist and talk about everything that you're going through. Yeah, that too. I really, really, really wish therapy anywhere in the world is made accessible. Because the people who come to our houses to clean or to cook, they're not making a lot of money. They don't have access to therapy. They don't know what therapy is, because we've also kind of made like, oh, therapy is for the privileged. Well, it kind of is, because those people, they've lived their lives like that.
Yeah, and affording therapy and nobody would be like hiring
because they also can't
going to a good therapist. Yeah, good therapist in Bombay itself costs like say 3K per session, 2 to 3K per session.
At least, starting is 2K. There are a few though who are charging lesser than that, but not a lot of people can afford it.
Yeah.
But I also get that therapists need to make their money, and I also get that therapists also. Sorry, that came out wrong. That's not how I meant it to be. Therapists also are doing very, very strenuous work. It takes a lot of energy to kind of speak to someone and help them, put their scattered thoughts in order. It takes a huge toll on them too. So I understand the reason to keep prices high, but there has to be more conversation around that. There has to be other ways of.
I think if looked into, there are quite a lot of accessible and affordable therapists these days. I mean, from all that's been going on, there have been so many numbers and sources being released online as to accessible and cheap therapy for people who can't afford it. And I think those are the things that needs to be shared rather than controversial whatever is being shared on social media. I mean, such
awareness. It's horrible, dude, because some people say stuff like, oh, I hate SSR for doing this to himself. How you how could you do this? How I hate you for this. You should have just been stronger. Here's the thing. As far as whatever little that I have knowledge about it, and that is very, very minuscule, it's when somebody's taking that step, that step is not necessarily taken in a flash. Sometimes your mind has convinced you that this is it. I think it's best to just end your life.
Yeah, there is no other way, right?
So there's a lot of there's also a lot of, because imagine, if I start talking, you get very I'll have to give out trigger warnings to these things, but
very sensitive topic.
sometimes the kind of action that one has to take to just use a ceiling fan to do what you're doing, it's not something you can do in a second. There is a plan. There's a whole headspace that you have already gotten into. So it's not about, oh, you should think about the people you love. Oh, you should think. You can't. Your brain has stopped. Your brain has now convinced itself in a certain direction. So we don't know. We can only sit here, make assumptions. We can put in our 2 cents of opinions, and you're done with it. That's what happens, right? Somebody passes on today, you talk about it, you grieve for a week, then you're like, oh, anyway, so when is the next gig? That's our life, right?
Yeah. So, what's your idea of self-care? What is something that you do?
Okay. My idea of self-care is take time out for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Feel those feelings. Feel the feelings that, literally feel those feelings. And self-care is not, spa, not necessarily going to the spa, getting a mani-pedi, just getting hot chocolate, just taking long showers. That is not just what self-care is about. Self-care is also, I read a beautiful article somewhere, that self-care is also about being a parent to yourself and getting up, and self-care is making your bed when you wake up in the morning. Self-care is washing those dishes. Self-care is making that cup of tea for yourself. Self-care is cooking a nutritious food for yourself, and just do it. My therapist once told me that, keep yourself productive. If you find yourself spiraling downwards, try to be productive. And then she also said, if you are going through something and you want to wallow in it, go wallow. You want to wallow for an entire day, lie in bed and just go wallow. But once you're done with it, you're done with it. So, but make sure you get done wallowing also. So if you want to wallow, sit, wallow, do everything. Get out of it. And there was a beautiful post I shared on my stories today about grief. Like, you mother your grief and you sit with it. You don't judge it. You need to be kind to yourself. So there's self-care there's so much that you can do. And of course, part of my self-care is also prayer. And I won't say I am highly religious as a human being, but I do have a few religious practices, but the ones that make sense to me. And it's just practicing meditation is very important.
Definitely.
Meditation. I also understand a lot of people can't meditate, because sometimes it's difficult for them. So different people should find different things that work for them. What works for me will not work for you, or will not work for A, B, or C. What works for A, B, or C may not work for me. So find out what works for you. Be kind to yourself. And again, this is something that's thrown around, but talk to yourself in a way that you would talk to your best friend. Like, really sit, wait. The other day I was feeling a lot of grief. I was feeling so much agony inside. I had a fight with a friend, and obviously because you're feeling so many things, it kind of manifests itself in whole different ways, and you're fighting about something so silly, but it's suddenly so big in your head. I actually gave myself time to just sit down and cry. So I'm just going to sit and cry. Feel that little bit of fire that you feel in your heart when your heart is burning. There's so much sadness, it's burning. Close your eyes and just feel it. Feel it. It's going to be hard. It's going to be so hard. But just sit and feel it. You have way more resilience than you can give yourself credit for. So, wow, this conversation went into a whole different direction.
Actually, I personally do a lot of live sessions talking about mental health. We should definitely carry this over there and
Yeah,
talk
we
about this another
definitely
time.
should. Yes.
Yeah. So we have like 1.5 minutes remaining, 2.5. I'm not sure.
Oh my
math
God,
is bad.
really? I spoke
I mean,
so
there's
much.
a
I talked so
countdown
much.
going on. So like, I would definitely want you to sing before you leave.
Okay, so in case it goes off, I'll join back in.
Okay.
Because the countdown is on. So
Oh no,
yeah.
the live will end on its own.
So, but they will show you a countdown, no?
Yeah, I mean, there's 1.5 minutes left.
Okay, so in case it shuts down, we can join back again.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. So you were saying.
Yeah. So yeah, I was saying this whole idea of being an artist and being in a space of music. Music is considered therapy. Music is considered therapeutic. So
Yeah.
does music help you calm or does music stress you out? How does music work for you?
There are a couple of practices that I have recently found that really works for me in terms of vocal practice that I do. That really calms me down. So that is something I've been doing regularly during this pandemic, because more than, of course, as practice, you're also honing your skills, but there's also, it just brings you together. It just energizes you. So that is something that I've been doing. And for those of you who want to know what practice I'm talking about, it's more like, something that we talk about, just singing one note at a time, slowly, and really like going into that note and just singing one note continuously.